Hi everyone, welcome to my session, Head plus Heart equals Growth. I'll be sharing ideas on how to unlock growth potential by tapping into the head and the heart of your brand. My name is Andy Whaley and I'm the Chief Growth Officer of JMark, a managed IT and cybersecurity firm headquartered in Springfield, Missouri. In this role, I oversee the growth team, which consists of sales, marketing, and revenue operations. I'll touch on those teams and how they all work together in just a bit. I've been in the marketing and sales world for about 30 years now, having led the brand marketing efforts for Bass Pro Shops, a national financial institution, and led advertising teams that served several Fortune 500 brands. But the last 5 years have been especially exciting to me as I've been able to lead sales efforts and strategy utilizing my marketing knowledge and background. And it's been a privilege to help the company I'm at consistently achieve year-over-year growth. And it's been a delight seeing the significant increase of brand awareness and brand perception in the markets that we're focusing on. When it comes to growth, every company seems to be trying to figure it out right now. And I don't believe there's one exact formula that works for every single company, but there are core principles that everyone should understand as they look to grow their brand and revenue. So let's talk about growth marketing. There are dozens of different definitions out there, just Google it, but it's really simple. While brand marketing may be focused on building awareness and brand perception, growth marketing is centered around getting prospective customers to take that next step in doing business with you. Of course, that end result of someone doing business with you is the ultimate objective, but it's usually a long game. And when you realize there are multiple steps along the customer journey, it does a couple things. First of all, it takes off some of the pressure that every marketing tactic has to result in a sale. And when you realize there are multiple steps along the journey, it forces you to get smarter about how to engage with the prospect along their journey and focus on what it takes for making that simple next step in the journey. This is part of what helped us at JMark be successful and continue growing year after year. Understanding the prospect experience and helping guide them along on the journey has been crucial. There are so many ingredients in the recipe of growth marketing, but knowing the prospective customers, finding ways to make the journey easy, and focusing on the next meaningful step has been a non-negotiable. When I started at JMark, I had the honor of bringing two teams together, marketing and sales. We also launched a third group within our larger team called Growth Ops, often referred to as Rev Ops or Revenue Operations. I want to touch on the various dynamics within each group in the larger growth team and share the value of each group, but also the power of them all working together as one unit. Marketing continues to do the core traditional functions of any marketing team, focusing on the brand, internal communications, and community engagement, but also a focus on growth marketing. Through this, our marketing members work closely with our sales members on lead generation strategies. I'm proud of our team working together to blend marketing tactics with touch points from sales to create seamless experiences along the prospect journey. There's no more of this passing off of the baton to sales and blaming them if they didn't convert a lead. It's this arm-in-arm approach of having the same goals, looking at the same metrics, and celebrating wins together. And it's been really important to us. Our sales team is made up of talented individuals who are driven to accomplish their goals. But what makes this group special is they enjoy collaborating with marketing, and they understand the power of data and how to rightly use data for their journey as salespeople. But what I'm really proud of is their ability to understand the journey of the prospect. They're so focused on identifying a win-win opportunity that they may be the first ones to be honest and share if they think it's not a win for the prospect. They take a consultative approach and find ways to truly help with education, understanding the deeper levels of what the client needs and wants, and finding ways to remove friction and effort in the prospect journey. With Growth Ops, the third team that I told you about, we're able to move faster and smarter with them. Our Growth Ops group is made up of self-proclaimed data and process junkies, and they're the ones that bring relevant data-backed insights to both sales and marketing. This team not only consistently brings reports of our various metrics, but they proactively find ways to help us refine our processes and everything we do to be more efficient and effective. It takes all these teams working together to do what we've been able to accomplish. I've shared a bit about structure and process, but I'd like to share about our approach to consultative selling, and our approach to marketing messaging. And it's what I call head and heart. I'm excited to get into this, so let's break it down. The prospective customer that you're engaging with is looking to solve a problem, or they're looking for a solution that addresses an existing or future pain point or opportunity for growth. As you know, there are a lot of boxes that need to be checked during that process of identifying the right vendor or product. And of course, the logical outcome-focused boxes need to be checked. That's the head part. It's the, hey, is my pricing in line with my budget? Does the product or service meet the specific needs? And will this product or service help get us to where we need to be? These are all great questions and important questions, but they have to do with black and white logic, or as I call it, the head. But I learned something important over the years. As humans, we want to be connected. We desire relationships with people that we can trust. We're typically risk averse, right? We want to experience safety. And these are all emotions, and they're all very important. In one of my favorite books called The Effortless Experience, the authors dive into this area with interesting findings backed by a large research project. By the way, if you love studying the customer experience, and if you haven't yet read it, I highly recommend the book. And in the book, the research showed that a whopping 66% of decision-making process is based on emotion. Wow. So that means only 1/3 of the decision-making process is based on fact and logic. So to put this another way, it is critically important to understand the emotions involved in the decision-making process. Weaving all of these elements into growth strategies is what I call the head and heart approach. So what does it all mean? What does it mean to check the different boxes both intellectually and emotionally to earn the position over your competitors of both top of mind and top of heart? That's right, I said top of heart. You've probably heard the phrase top of mind before. It simply speaks to being the brand or product that people think of first. But top of heart? Let's unpack this a bit. It's a phrase I came up with a few years ago, and I think it makes total sense. Think about it. What does it mean for you to communicate the what, but also the why? What does it mean to be the one that your prospective customer keeps coming back to because of how they feel about you and your product or service? Now, of course, you have to check all the head boxes. If you don't, you won't even be in the running for consideration. That's just the minimum right to play. But what if they want your product or service at a greater level because they like you and they like how they feel when they think of partnering with you and your company? I know it sounds crazy, but there are ways to accomplish this. In fact, I'd like to share 5 common check boxes for the head or logical part of the buying process, and also 5 ways to connect on the heart or the emotional part of the equation. When interacting with prospects, you need to be able to answer these 5 logical questions addressing the head component. So number 1, product features. The first and most obvious question: does your product or service address the immediate or future needs that's being communicated? Number 2, value proposition. How is the value of your product or service different from the competition? What are the benefits to the customer that the features enable? It's great to share a feature, but what is the benefit to the customer that makes them want to look into your product or service even more? Does the value not only address the primary customer concern, but also do so in a way that makes their life easier or better? Or perhaps maybe even addresses additional areas in the business that helps the prospect even more. Number 3, differentiation. I love this one. What are your points of differentiation? In a world where everything is feeling more and more commoditized, how are you standing out so much that it feels like it's its own product category or market? How are you demonstrating the difference and also communicating it so it feels like a huge gap between you and everybody else? Number 4, pricing. I intentionally mentioned pricing after value and differentiation. If you, during the sales process, introduce pricing before communicating value and setting yourself apart from the competition, it's probably going to be tough. From a pricing standpoint, are you within the prospect's budget parameters? It's okay to have a higher price than the other competitors as long as you clearly articulate the increased value and why your offering makes the most sense. Number 5 and final is guarantee. Is there a guarantee or some kind of agreement that if something goes wrong, it'll be fixed? I almost titled this one risk mitigation, as at the end of the day, that's the underlying motivation for a purchase decision. The buyer is saying, if I agree to purchase your offering, will you make it right if something goes wrong? Now let's get to the emotional heart side of things. This can be a little more complex, as you need to be able to address the spoken and often unspoken emotional needs of the buyer. But before I get into my 5 recommendations, let's take a moment and consider common emotional motivations. We're all mostly alike with these. We desire to feel good, not bad, right? We desire an easier life or an easier time as opposed to a harder time. We enjoy being connected to friends and family instead of being isolated or alone. You may not have expected a psychology moment here, but Maslow's hierarchy of needs is incredibly relevant. Think about it. As humans, we all have needs and motivations. And as Dr. Abraham Maslow stated in his theory, we actually have 5 categories of needs. It starts with the basic, most foundational layer called physiological needs. This includes things like shelter, food, water, air, and sleep. The next level up is security and safety, which includes personal security, employment, and health, among other things. Now, if you've seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know it's a bit of a triangle, right? And there's all the different levels. So once you have your physiological needs met and your safety and security needs met, then you go to the 3rd level, which is love and belonging, or more simply put, our social needs. This includes friendship, family, intimacy, and a sense of belonging and connection. The next level up is self-esteem. This important level includes things like respect, achievement, recognition, and confidence. And finally, the top level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is self-actualization. This very complex level includes the need to achieve one's full potential. It's all about creativity, morality, and experiencing purpose and meaning. As we get into the 5 ways to connect on the emotion or the heart side of things, I want to remind you that research shows 2/3 of decision making is based on emotion. It's important to understand how to connect with people at an emotional level. So, without further ado, here are 5 ways to connect with your prospects with the heart side of things. Number 1, quite simply, be a brand with heart. A brand that stands for something significant and meaningful. Many companies fall into the trap of creating a widget or a service, and they try to come up with clever advertising and cross their fingers, they hope they grow revenue. And I know I'm oversimplifying that, but you get it. A company that stands out is the one that puts people first. It's the one that invests in things that matter, whether it's the employees or investing in the community or simply finding ways to give back. All of that works to create a healthy culture, and that culture comes out in authentic brand communications and interactions with its employees. Most importantly, in my opinion, it comes out with salespeople talking to prospects. When you have healthy people representing a healthy brand or culture, I promise your prospects will feel the difference. I've seen it. Number 2, What's in it for me? Or as I call it, the with 'em. I've led several marketing teams over the years, and I've always told the teams, when you're coming up with marketing messaging, if you're not delivering on the with 'em, try again. You need to communicate how your product or service benefits your target audience and provides them something they want or need. This often will lead to some kind of benefit at an emotional level. An example of this is a brand ad campaign that we created at JMark. The whole concept was giving you time back for what matters most. I commissioned an independent research study of executive leaders across multiple markets. Some were JMark clients and some were not clients of ours. We found many amazing data points, but one that stood out to me, it was incredible. It was that clients of JMark enjoyed more time with family and more time doing recreational activities compared to other similar leaders not using JMark. That was a really cool insight, and it confirmed something that we've always believed. Our team at JMark works extra hard on making technology work really well for our clients so that they don't have to. In doing this, our clients save valuable time. Instead of spending frustrating hours trying to fix things that don't work during the day and night, they're able to focus on what matters most to them. That's a huge deal. So instead of creating an ad that just brags about product features, we immediately went to the heart of the benefits of partnering with JMark. We help give time back for the things that matter most. In the hierarchy of needs, I just talked about love and belonging, and this brand ad campaign showcased examples of people being with family and friends doing the things that they love. When your marketing can show how you help people achieve their emotional desires and needs, it just hits different. It can resonate deeply and make a memorable impact. Number 3, make it easy. How can what you offer make something more easy for an individual? This could be something as simple as removing steps that they typically have to take to achieve an outcome, or it could be helping them easily achieve more of something than they normally would. Achieving more of something, especially if it's tied to a company objective or KPI, helps them feel like a hero. It helps them feel that important sense of accomplishment that we actually just talked about in the hierarchy of needs. Or if your product or service offering just makes their life easier, you're removing some of that frustration that they may be feeling, and that is a huge benefit. Number 4 is pain resolution. Be the one that solves the pain. Of that small group of prospects that's actually looking for a service or a product that you represent, I guarantee you they're experiencing some kind of pain that's causing them to look for other options. Most people don't like change. I don't. So if you are finding people proactively looking to change, they're probably experiencing some kind of pain that hurts more than the perceived pain of change. And that's a big deal. There's a sales training group named Sandler. I've used them. I'm actually still using them right now. They're amazing. And the Sandler sales methodology teaches there's actually 3 levels of pain. Number 1 is the surface pain, which is typically what a prospect may mention first in a meeting. A little bit deeper than that, number 2 is the company pain. Often it's the financial impact to the company from that issue. But then there's a 3rd level of pain. It's the personal level. And in my opinion, this can be the hardest, but one of the most important levels of pain to uncover. Once you understand the personal impact of the issue, you can start to shine light on how your product or service will help them. Having this moment where the prospect understands personal impact is huge because they will become an advocate and a cheerleader for you and your brand. Number 5, relationship versus transaction. Whether you're a B2C company or a B2B, you can create a brand relationship with your target audience. It's all about consistent, meaningful touch points that set you apart from others. We all love increased revenue, and that comes from transactions. I get it. I like that too, for sure. But it matters how you go about that. I mentioned this in the beginning of the session, but with my sales team, we take a consultative approach and are focused on the win-win. In fact, someone from my team may be the first to speak out in a meeting if they're not seeing the win for the prospect. And it's a really cool moment because it builds trust and often results in a deeper conversation and finding out how to create the win for both sides. We also believe in demonstrating integrity, honesty, and kindness along the way. It may sound obvious, these things that I'm saying, but it's amazing how rare this is. And we hear about it from the prospect, how so many competitors don't show these traits. They don't show these behaviors, and it makes a big difference. So those are 5 ways to connect on an emotional level with your prospects. Be a brand with heart, communicate the emotional value for them, make it easy, help resolve their pain, and utilize a relational approach over a transactional approach. So consider how to use these head and heart insights in both your marketing messaging and in your live personal encounters with your prospective customers. And don't let these new smarter communications just stop at the sale, especially in the B2B world. It's important and okay to remind your customers of the value that they enjoy by partnering with you. This can be done in consistent business reviews or a timely communication before contract renewal. So on top of those 5 head and 5 heart points that I provided, I just want to throw in a few bonus questions that you should be asking yourself as it relates to the growth marketing and sales process. So ask yourself these 3 things. Number 1, am I talking to the right person? For marketing, make sure your messaging is laser focused on the decision makers and the influencers of that decision. Specifically on the sales side, you have to make sure that at some point you're interacting with the one who has buying authority. If you can help it, do not fall in the trap of relying on an influencer to share everything with their boss or the decision maker and hoping that they represent you and your offering well. Does not always work. Number 2, ask yourself, do I know the audience enough to provide relevant messaging and information? I know this is a basic foundational principle, but you absolutely have to know your customer, know your audience. Ask yourself, are they a fit for you? Are they in an industry that you've been successful with before? Prior to meeting with a prospect, have you researched them? Of course, LinkedIn is a great tool for this, but there are also amazing AI-based tools to help you go deeper with prospect insights. Personally, I like to use Humantic AI. That's Humantic AI, if you're looking it up. This is one of my absolute favorite tools in our tech stack. And while it does many things, the part that I find most helpful is identifying the DISC personality profile of individuals. So before going into a meeting with someone, I'm able to find out about how they think and act and what would be a good approach to take in the meetings. I could talk a lot more about this tool, but I'll stop there. Look it up for yourself. Lastly, number 3, ask yourself, have I identified various levels of pain? I mentioned this just a bit ago, but it's worth going back to. Take the time to ask good questions and identify the surface level of pain and also those deeper levels of pain that they may not talk about right away. You may have to ask more questions to understand how the situation has been personally impacting them or their team. But get to the heart of it. Remember, 2/3 of the decision-making process is based on emotion. I hope this has been helpful for you, and I look forward to hearing what stood out to you most and how you're looking to evolve your sales and marketing strategies. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know your thoughts. Cheers to you and your head and heart growth journey.
I'd like to start this entire conversation by talking about the role of CX in an organization and how I think we can take the conversation quite a bit further than we do today. For most in CX, and where it really started, was around issue resolution. You start having conversations around what's going wrong, how big is that problem, and let's go fix it if it's a big enough problem. And that turns CX into a great profession, an important profession, but a firefighting profession. CX taken a bit further takes it one step along the path into communication. So what do we do well? What do our customers love? How can the marketing department start to lean into what we're learning? Which is also important and good. And we start to learn some of those things. Where CX never really gets involved in the conversation as deep as it can is in innovation. There's a lot of room to learn from our customers, not by what they think of our current products and services and approach, but what they would love us to do. And if we get a handle on that, about what they would love us to do, how they would love to feel working with our business, we can start to have a different kind of conversation about innovation and about how our customers can guide our path to the future. CX in a lot of ways is not just understanding and reporting on customer data. That's the role of basic customer insights teams. Important, but that's their job. They collect customer data and they report on it. An experienced customer data group, or an experienced customer insights team, you might call it, is full of great storytellers. They take that data and they wrap it up into a great set of narratives. What are we learning customers? How can we turn that into an arc that the customer gets behind? Again, equally good, but now we're still in the realm of an experienced customer insights team. What makes CX is when we take that leap from data reporting and storytelling into idea generation and idea selling. We need a consistent way within CX to both generate new ideas and sell them to groups of influential people within the organization that are going to start driving the kinds of change in activities that are going to have a meaningful, long-lasting impact on the business. This is why CX exists. It's how we leverage what we learn about our customers to make the business do things better and drive better outcomes for both customers and the bottom line. But great ideas can really change everything. And a great idea is not easy to generate. A great idea has to do a few things. It has to be good for the customer. It has to be good for the business. It has to be realistic. It has to be measurable. Pretty high bar, pretty high standard. So it's not just a whimsy thing. It's not just saying we should do this or we could do that. It's an idea that comes from the heart and soul of what your customers most desire about you and how you as a business can best serve that in potentially your new or innovative way. It's going to be better for everybody. Unfortunately, most of the metrics and ways we look at measuring and talking to customers are just letting us down on this front. There are no new ideas coming from customer satisfaction metrics, for example. Looking at a quarter over quarter line that fluctuates from 78 to 79 to 78 to 77 is doing nothing to start to inspire new thinking or new ideas. And in fact, the only idea it gives is that other people might start thinking that maybe CX isn't all that valuable. We need to hold ourselves within this industry to a higher standard than just measuring quarter over quarter CSAT results, quarter over quarter NPS results, tracking down issues, resolving problems, and calling it at the day. We're not in the business of iteration, or at least that shouldn't be the central part of our business. Operators know how to iterate their business. They know what's going well. They know where there's percentage betterments to be made. They can do those based on a cost-benefit analysis, and those things happen. We need to better serve customers in a dynamic world where new competitors are coming all the time, where new technology is threatening our technology unless we learn how to harness it, where the expectations of people not even in our industry are starting to impact how people look at our company. One of the funny things I've often thought early in my career is a customer can't help you innovate. A customer can only react to the reality that's in front of them. So if you ask a customer, well, what would you like to see us do that's different? It's a pretty dumb question. They don't know. They don't know what's possible or not possible. But what we can learn through this lens of customer emotions, what we can learn is how they want to feel. And that is the wellspring of innovation that way too often gets overlooked. If we learn how our customers want to feel and the things that we're doing today that make them feel those feelings, or the things we're doing today that make them not feel those feelings, or worse, feel the opposite of those feelings, then we can start to drive some action. And then we can drive some innovation. We can say, well, our customers are driving, let's say, for example, this feeling of joy. Our customers want joy out of working with our brand. If we know 3 or 4 or 5 things they're using to describe this concept of joy, then we can say, well, if those things are true, what does it look like if we double down? What does that look like in other parts of the journey? What does that look like across our different channels? Now you're innovating against something much more predictably to have a positive outcome on the business. So when we think about the idea, not measuring emotion, you're shooting your ability to actually innovate and create new ideas and drive your business forward in new and compelling ways straight in the foot. So let's start measuring emotion. So let's get into the science of customer emotions a little bit. There's a lot of really good data that backs up why emotions are so important in driving people to do what they do, and then looking at how we can actually measure that to drive different outcomes. A great behavioral scientist called Nico Frida came up with the theory of action readiness. Basically, the idea there is that emotions are the precursor to all actions. In the end, really, you are always actioning emotion, and your customers are always acting on emotion. There's nothing that anybody ever does that doesn't start with an emotional undertone. Whether or not you continue to watch this video is based on the emotion of how much you think this is a good use of your time. You will feel bored, you will feel intrigued, you will feel excited, you'll feel interested. Whatever you feel is going to impact what you do next. I hope you're going to stick with it because you're going to see a lot of interesting stuff. But in the end, what you do is up to you and up to the emotions you're feeling at this point in time. When I'm looking at data on our end and I'm talking to our customers, I always remember and to reiterate one concept to them. Every single customer-facing action you do creates a measurable emotional reaction. There is nothing that you put in front of your customer that they see that they don't respond to emotionally. It may be with indifference. It may be not with the response you want, but it is going to be a response based on an emotion. So don't ever think you're not actioning emotion or that emotions are too hard to drive. You're doing it all the time. Now it's just about bringing intention to that. What emotions are we looking to drive? How do we define what contributes to those good emotional outcomes? And what are we doing to make that happen? Gerald Zaltman out of Harvard famously said that 95% of all customer purchase decision-making takes place in the subconscious emotional mind. That basically means that if you're not looking at emotions, especially in a customer experience role, you're not being customer-centric. You're not responding to the ways your customers actually behave and think about your business and your products. And if you're not being customer-centric, you're not even actually then doing CX. We have to be looking at emotions in this industry if we are doing right by both our customers and the businesses that hire us to get more out of them and to start serving them better. One of the ways I like to look at this is to ask people, what are the drivers of customer satisfaction for you and your business? What are the drivers of your NPS ratings? And I'll often get back these things. Oh, it's our pricing. It's our location. It's our convenience. It's the quality of our customer service, or like the cleanliness of our change rooms, if you're a retailer, for example. There's a few things wrong with using these as your core drivers, most of which is around the idea that they're binary. They work or they don't. Your locations are where they are, or you can somehow change them. Typically, you can't. So you can't do anything about it. Things like service speed, or cleanliness of a retail change room, or speed of a checkout. You max those out pretty quickly. You can only be so clean. You can only be so fast. After one click, how much faster can you go? At that point in time, that driver ceases to be very useful to you. What are you going to do? What's the next step? There's usually not a next step. On pricing, what are you going to do next? Lower your price to a point of being harmful to your business? Those kinds of drivers might have an impact, but they're not really helping you run your business. Where we drive innovation and different thinking is when we apply drivers that are more emotion driven. So let's say instead of what are the structural, tactical, hard parts of our business that are driving customer satisfaction or NPS, like service or price, what about things like honesty? What about something like empathy? How well we understand our customers? What about something like meaning? They're feeling that we stand for something more than what we sell. All of a sudden, we start to have a different conversation. What does it look like to max out empathy? You can't really. What does it look like to understand your customers extremely well to the point where you've done 100% good? There's no such thing. What does it look like to stand for something more than what you sell, to have a strong sense of meaning associated with your business across all of your business lines, across all of your channels? You can always take that further. Using customers as this interesting middleman between the CX metrics you look at, whether it's NPS or customer satisfaction, and the things you do, helps you to understand where your customers are coming from and then take that conversation much further and start to innovate and make your business much better. So now it's not about our pricing itself being good or bad. It's not about our change rooms being clean or unkempt. It's about how those things make our customers feel. And if those clean change rooms make our customers feel valued and respected, then how do we take this idea that our customers who feel valued and respected, boy, they tend to spend more money, they come more often, they advocate for us. Gosh, let's look at our entire customer journey and think about how we can make them feel valued and respected all the way, because our change rooms are doing it. Is our online checkout process, is the way we sort our products, is our pathing through our stores, is our customer service reps making people valued and respected? Because those things are what we need to be looking for. And you ignite a much different type of conversation overall. Emotions are not at all hard to action. Remember, every action creates an emotional reaction. Now it's just about how we tie the things we do to the emotions we create, and knowing that those emotions we create quantifiably tie to better outcomes. Success in CX is simply an outcome of the feelings we consistently give our customers. As long as those feelings are the ones that they want to feel, we're going to be successful. There's never been a better time to be a practitioner measuring customer emotion. Before literally the last couple of years, it's been a real slog to do this kind of work. Emotions by nature are pretty mushy. They're hard to quantify. What does it really mean for the business? Were all things that required a lot of different levers to get pulled. Some data exercises that were maybe not all that fun or even possible for people in different roles or different resourcing. But honestly, with the new AI tools and resources at our fingertips, this is something we can do a lot more readily. So how to get started? The first thing you got to do is capture your customer emotions. This can come from a few different places. You may have surveys in place already that are capturing some level of emotion around things like trust, or around things like, do I understand my customers? Do they feel like I make up for mistakes? Whatever those emotional states are that you currently capture, continue to do so, because now we're going to start to think about how we can leverage real customer data into those in an actionable way. If you're not doing it through surveys and you're just doing it through conversational listening, that's just as good or even better. You can start to take in all of the open-ended feedback your customers are giving you and start piping in questions. What emotions going on here am I seeing? First of all, like, what are they displaying? What are they wishing for that I'm not giving them? We can start to do a lot with open-ended data, which is a real strength of AI today. Let's say you're collecting it in surveys, seeing a lot of words around trust. I would actually recommend not to use trust as an emotion. It is really a catch-all for a lot of emotions. So whether or not somebody trusts you is based on the extent that you make them feel good, make them feel respected, make them feel like you have their backs. All these things feed into the idea that you are a trustworthy person or organization. If trust is something that you are looking at a lot today, I would just suggest you break that down into its component parts if you can. Take all those emotions that you value. Sometimes you can even get this from your own mission statements. What do you stand for organizationally? Let's create some emotional hypotheses around that. And then let's use some AI tools. I use one called Caplana. There's a lot out there that you can use to code open ends into themes. So this part is actually, there's a lot of tools out there that do a great job of taking open-ended data and turning it into topics, turning it into themes, saying, wow, people are talking a lot about customer service from a lot of different components. They're talking about friendliness, they're talking about helpfulness, they're talking about professionalism, they're talking about expertise. These are all levels of detail that you're going to need to start to feed into the emotional context that you're trying to wrap up. And then, of course, you can start to understand and leverage things like ChatGPT, for example, or other conversational AI tools to look at things like your reviews and online comments and understand what are the emotional filters that you need to be looking at. Let's take an example. I think it's always best to do an example. One of the things I recently did was I rented a car on a recent trip, and I looked at the reviews for the car rental agency that I was going to be going with, and I did some fun work. I actually myself for this one just used ChatGPT, and I took a bunch. I think about 30 or 40 online reviews for this organization, and I dumped it in, and I asked a simple question. I said, "What are the top 3 emotions that customers wish they were getting from this car rental agency that they're currently being let down on?" That was an important part of that prompt. So I didn't want to know that people were feeling frustrated or mad or confused. I wanted to know what they wanted to feel and where were they feeling let down. Very interestingly, I got some fun words back. Relaxed was a word that came back. Customers are feeling frustrated that their vacation experience was becoming a confused one, was becoming unexpected, and it was taking away this feeling of relaxation. So there's an important word. If you're a car rental agency, how do you keep people feeling relaxed? That's an important one. People are on vacation. Appreciated, basic human respect. Things might break, things might not go well. That's okay. But how do we still communicate like we're human beings having an interaction and not a number and not just a cog in a process? It's a really important part. And then the last one was calmness. The customer is getting angered, the service rep is getting angered, people are getting heightened. So very quickly, I saw from this rental agency, there's a lot of people losing out on this idea that they wanted to feel relaxation, appreciation, and calmness. Those are really powerful words. And again, you can start to take those same words and put them across your journey. But I never would have got that so easily looking at 40 reviews, for example, online, as we could have using things like AI tools, using things as simple and accessible as ChatGPT, which pretty much everybody has access to today. If you're going to be using any AI tools to this effect to understand where maybe you're letting your customers down or opportunities for you to start to drive different or better results, you might want to just check to make sure you can use those tools within your organization. I always would typically blind anything to do with either customer information or company information. Even if it's not personally identifiable information, you also want to make sure you're never releasing anything that is corporately sensitive to AI models, especially trainable models. You can also get access to a lot of these models and make sure that you're not part of their training algorithms. It's another important piece to keep as you're using potentially sensitive company or customer data, even if it's publicly available reviews. You want to make sure that you're doing your part to keep your company safe as you're using these tools to do your job better. There is no sector or discipline that AI was truly made for like it has been made for the customer experience professional. For people who are trying to distill what is really going on among tens of thousands, very often case, tens of thousands of customers dealing with us every single day, how do I distill that into simple insights that anybody can follow? Without the lens on the data that AI gives us, we're just left with these giant data stores that we can't even access. But today we can access and we can make good use of them. With caution, these are still new tools, but learn to use them. Get your hands dirty. Try them as much as you can, because this is where it's going, and this is the next frontier in how we can start to leverage emotions in a really powerful and fast way within customer experience. How can you get started with emotions? It's actually pretty easy, and you don't really need any new tools or anything. You just need a brainstorm. We have to take a scientific approach to this and create some hypotheses, and then we can go ahead and test those. But let's start with some really educated guesses. The first place to start is to think, what are the 3 or 4 desired emotional states? Sometimes these are, again, related to your mission or related to the behaviors of your best customers that you will learn. When people are feeling a certain way, what does that mean for their likelihood to advocate for you or use you? Do you see a trend that when people are saying those most likely to feel a great deal of empathy coming from our organization are doing a lot of the right things? Those are really good to know. So what are those 3 or 4 desired emotional states? And then we start to think about the customer-facing actions we're taking that are most correlated to driving those positive or negative emotional reactions. So if, we want to create a sense of joy among our customers, you can start to think about, what does that mean for our online store and the ability to search for and find products that you need? What does it mean for our customer service? What does that mean for shipping? What does that mean for our pricing, and so on and so on? What are the specific customer facing actions we take that are most correlated to the positive emotional reactions and the negative emotional reactions? Again, these are just hypotheses at this point. These are things that you can test. Then my favorite part is, based on that, let's start thinking about what the actions we could be taking to keep those positive emotions coming, those 3 or 4 that are very strongly related to the best customer outcomes. What else can we do? And for some of that, again, the AI modeling, the tools that we looked at are great, because you can start to put their emotions into tangible actions. We can start to learn what, for example, joy means to your customers. Maybe joy is simply getting things right in an industry that tends to get things wrong. Maybe joy is something around delight, though. Maybe it is something above and beyond. That's for you with your data analytics and your tools and your customer data to start to understand. But if you know what those things mean today, then you start to take that to other places across your channels and across your journey. There's a worksheet available within this masterclass to guide you through some of this thinking. On one side is a whole bunch, just a list of dozens and dozens of positive emotions that you can start to think about which ones are the most impactful that you think are leading to the best outcomes. It's better if you can back it up with data, but if we're starting with hypotheses, that's okay. You can start to think about the actions you're taking that are driving those moments or hurting them. And then we start to think about the innovations. Then the next thing you can do after that is take that, ideate with it, brainstorm with it, but then start to test it. Throw some ideas at your UX team, throw some ideas at your product team, put some ideas out in marketing and see what people are responding to. Put some questions in your next CSAT or NPS or brand tracking survey to understand if these are the things that are truly tied the way you think they are to the emotions and the outcomes you're creating. But it can only start with a strong hypothesis to guide your thinking. I love starting every engagement with this because it starts to showcase the gap between what you think is going on, what you think is driving your customers to be doing taking certain actions with you, and what's actually going on. And it also opens up very early for a CX or executive team the opportunities for us to be learning new things from our customers that can drive different conversations for our organizations. That can take us from a company that iterates, progressively, slowly, better experiences across things that are possibly important, to innovating brand new ideas in a really dynamically changing competitive landscape against things we know are critical. This is what turns professionals from solid insight storytellers, let's say, into really impactful CX idea sellers, getting things happening. And I like to say always, it's not actionable insights, it's action driving intelligence. It's the kind of feedback you learn that just makes people stand up and start getting to work, because you can't ignore it. You can't ignore how powerful it is. Start with a great hypothesis, use that worksheet, and let's get to work. Let's create some really powerful customer experiences based on not on the things you do, but on the ways you want to make your customers feel. It's the most important thing you'll ever do. Good luck.
Hey guys, my name is Chip Massey, and I was an FBI special agent and hostage negotiator for over 22 years. And I'm here today to talk to you about a concept called forensic listening. And we all know how important it is to be able to read somebody. And when we say read, We're really talking about how do we understand people better? And that's what forensic listening is all about. And to get there, let's talk about some of these concepts and some of the kind of strategies that we've used in the past. What if your instincts are wrong? Now, that could be terrifying, but there are some instincts that we have, some behaviors, some patterns of communication that aren't always right. And I'm differentiating this from what we call that spidey sense, that tingling that we get when the back of our neck hairs stand up, when we encounter a situation that seems like it could be dangerous or have a kind of a bad feel to it. Well, this is different than that. And what we mean by the idea that sometimes your instincts are wrong is that sometimes our instincts can lead us astray. That is, if we always do what we've always done in terms of our communication techniques and how we think we're understanding other people, there's a good chance we're going to get it wrong sometimes. And maybe you right now, as you're talking and thinking about this, is that in the back of your mind, you might be thinking of a relationship that went south recently or in the past. And it's something that is difficult to recover from, isn't it? So this is what we're centering on. Again, this is a high value, something that we all need to do better. And that's why you need a proven and repeatable method to read people more effectively. That's what we're all about. And that's so comforting, I think, when we discuss this and when we teach this concept to executives and institutions, we hear this again is that, it's so good to know that there is something that I can do, that I have control over. And that if I just learn this new technique or add this one thing to my toolbox, I'll be that much better. And the 22-second read is a part of that. Is that, and listen to this, it's that to read people consistently, you must be willing to identify and listen to what they believe in and desire and value the most. Now, let me ask you, how many times in your life has somebody done that for you? To focus in on what you believe in, to understand what you desire, and what it is that you value. Those are critical, important themes in somebody's world. And if you can touch down onto those things, you are going to be 90% better than anyone else out there for them. Trust me, it's a fact. One of the ways to analyze this is to think about it from a standpoint of how that person is thinking about you. And that's why we say your story, your style, and your state. So, first, going with your style. People are prejudging you. We know that. And the way you show up, whether it's your energy level, how you're dressed, how the mood you seem to be in, people are always pinging us, right? They're always using that sonar to detect what it is about us that we're giving off and that they're picking up. So remember that. The second is your story. These are feelings that we're holding in, spoken and unspoken. So, and again, if we know other people to a certain degree, we're going to pick up that vibe, that thing, that energy that they may not be telling you, but they're feeling, and you're getting a sense that something is off. And your state, where again, this is how we're feeling, and whether we're one of those people that hold things in and we think no one gets it and no one sees it. They do. There's a difference. Trust me, there's a difference. And if the person is perceptive and maybe is clued in on the kind of things we're talking about today, they're going to be picking those things up. So it's so important to remember that communication is not about you just showing up and listening, but it's also about how you're showing up and what they're seeing in front of them. Now, this is when you turn it. So, all right, you've addressed yourself, your own concerns, how you're showing up. Now it's them. So you're looking at their style. Is their communication style tentative, probing, or precise, or is it, all over the place? What kind of communicator are they? And then their story, how they want you to perceive them. So we all know people when we get into circumstances, conversations. Some people are just eager to tell you all about them. that they're there really to tell the story. And so that's important to note. And some people just prefer listening, to sit back and take it in and maybe comment at the end or not at all. But that's who they are. Now, their state, are they open, guarded, sincere, insincere? Again, going back to that previous slide, is that sometimes we know somebody's there and they're just there to talk about themselves. They're so excited about who they are and what they are, and they want you to know that too. So again, all these things aren't necessarily good or bad. They're just ways of interpreting somebody and building a database that's going to be important for you. So let's say, and this kind of takes people aback sometimes, but you're going to get it as I go on. We want you to profile your boss and client like you're tracking a serial killer with pattern of life. Okay. Now here's the murder board, right? The investigative board that you see on all the crime shows, right? So you've got that in the center. You've got the web of string that's going out to various areas. And this is really a way of thinking about it, is that you're piecing together and understanding someone from a perspective that is taking in all areas of their life as much as you can get. Information is powerful, and all information is good information. We're not judging the merits of what you've just got out of a conversation or saw in interaction. You're simply adding to the database, and all this will make sense later on. And this is really what we're doing. So what my business partner Adele Gambardella and I do is that we've taken my experience in the FBI, the tactics that I've learned, and we infuse it with her business know-how, things that she learned in Madison Avenue and running her own PR and crisis communications agency. So it's those elements put together to understand people better. And so what we're asking you to do is conduct an investigation. And really, again, think about this from that standpoint, and that you're really finding out what a person is like, who they are and what they are, and why they do what they do. So if you think about this, it's a way of going deeper and reminding yourself, wait a minute, I'm not just going with the same old, same old. I'm going to conduct an investigation. So to do that, you have to establish a baseline of behavior with that person. Right? Again, a common technique in the FBI is that you want to know what they're like when they're interacting with their boss, when they're at a restaurant ordering food, when they're trying to introduce someone to a new prospective client. What is it and how are they acting? And that can include also non visual communication, that can include emails, text messages. All that is a part of who they are. And what is it that they're trying to communicate to the world in these different circumstances? And we suggest that you observe somebody in 3 to 5 sentences. And that what we're saying is that you're going to identify a signature personality, consistency, or inconsistency. This is all in the pattern of life. So again, what are they like when they're at a restaurant with perhaps a boss or a potential client? What are they like when they're just in the office area and they're talking to colleagues? What are they like when they're in front of a potential client? And what is it about them that is consistent and not consistent, and depending upon which situation that they're in? All of that is important. Now, here's a great concept that you're going to be able to use right away, and this is called the unstated narrative. And the unstated narrative is simply this: it is the disconnect between what somebody believes about you, who you are, who you represent, who you work for, and your offerings, the products, and what they're willing to tell you to your face. So it's the holdback. It's the thing they have in reserve. Right? Say, for example, you've been dealing with somebody and you've been just trying to improve it. Maybe you're trying to get a client to sign. Maybe you've been trying to sell to them and you just haven't been receptive. Well, there's reasons for that. And whatever that holdback is, whatever they are reticent about, there's something in the back of their mind they're holding. Now imagine if you can get close to what that reservation is about, If you don't have to get it like right on the nose that you like, yep, I uncovered it, it's this. You don't even have to get it that close. But if you can get a little bit closer than you have in the past, get an idea about what this thing is, again, you are going to be so much better at perhaps a breakthrough with that person just because you're making an effort and they see that and they know that you're trying. It means a lot. And so here we're going to talk about the differences in active listening. You've all heard about active listening. It's a great tool to use when you're trying to de-escalate somebody and show interest in a conversation. But we're taking it a step further with forensic listening. So that's why we have here is that active listening is the idea is to, its purpose is to de-escalate in the moment, typically used in high stress situations. It seeks to build rapport, but it has limited application and rules of engagement, okay? Just because of the purposes we outlined. Now, forensic listening, again, the purpose is to re-examine a conversation after it's happened because we believe words leave clues. And it's effective in any type of situation to build a relationship. It seeks to build trust and penetrate hidden beliefs, which could be their unstated narrative, over several conversations. It's a method used over time to uncover conversational clues that could be targeted validation, predictive statements, bringing them to a better future of self and outcomes. And this is, we're putting this slide up because it's a great differentiator between the two and how one is kind of like the next step to understanding somebody. So let's talk more about forensic listening. And what we do is we suggest that you take notes in a different way. So we all have note taking that we use to get next actions down and important things to remember. But in this way, we want you to take notes from an understanding about who this person is and what they're trying to tell you and not tell you. So we suggest that you take notes from 4 different aspects, and you can divide your page using this like a quadrant. So the first aspect of forensics and forensic listening is emotions. And what we mean by that is when they're talking to you, what dominant emotion is present? What seems to be something that they're getting excited about, or something that they feel passionate about, or perhaps something that brings them down? So you want to cue in on that. The other is themes. So when they're talking to you, if they repeat something more than once, more than twice, it's important to them. And it better be important to you because they're trying to tell you something. It's so true is that, we always go into conversation and meetings and we think we know what the purpose of a meeting or conversation is going to be. And as we're unwinding it and we're learning more about that person and listening to them, we know all of a sudden it's kind of changed, right? We are hearing something different. And that's what's important to them. So that's a theme, and that needs to be remembered, and you need to write that down. Their voice, pitch, tone, and cadence, so critical. So as somebody's in front of you and they're describing something, they're excited about it, you're going to know. Why? Because you're going to hear in their emotion, it's a theme that they're repeating, and their voice, right? That when we're excited about things, our repetitive speech picks up, our tone goes up, everything changes. But when something's just not right, it's going nowhere, right? You can hear it. Our tone goes down. The speech level, it decreases. Everything is kind of like bottoming out. And body positioning is the last. And what we mean by body positioning is that we differentiate it from body language because body positioning indicates that we are always creatures of movement within our world and how we're interacting with other people in it. So again, if we were to put all these things together and you knew that the purpose, let's say the purpose of this meeting that your boss called was, hey, we really have to work better at our client relationships. We've got to develop better client relationships. I'm feeling like out there, you guys aren't really doing that. It's kind of perfunctory, it's more transactional, but we want you to connect. We want you to connect at a deeper level. So that might be the stated purpose. Now, what you're hearing though is that they've repeated this thing about check-ins more than twice. The boss has been saying, to you, is like, yeah, we, really got to develop these relationships, and I need to know what you're doing out there. Again, relationship building is so important, and also I need to have daily reports about the people you've contacted and what's going on with you. So we know it might be stated about client relationships, but what is it that they're concerned about? They're concerned about you informing them about what you're doing. So that could have been missed, but you took the notes, you figured it out. And here's the other thing that you did. Now we're going to add in what we call targeted validation. And targeted validation is simply when, let's say, again, you've been taking notes at this meeting. You go back, you review it, and you pick it out. Yep, I think this was the real theme. This was the thing that seemed to be important to them about check-ins. So 2 weeks later, you go to your boss, your supervisor, team leader, whoever it was, and you say, hey, listen, I just wanted you to know that conversation that you had with the group, it really made an impact on me. And I know it's so important to develop client relationships, but I also got a sense that you were very concerned about check-ins and about us updating you on a regular basis. And I just want you to know, I went back and I started to pull together a system that will automatically send you an email whenever I'm meeting with somebody and how that meeting went. You're going to get an updated notes on everything that I'm doing at the end of it every week. Can you imagine the difference that makes in a relationship? And because what does that tell the other person? One, that you took the time and the effort to pull out something that they didn't think people were going to get, but they hoped they did. It showed that you were paying attention. It showed that you were seeing them and what was important to them at the time. And not only that, but it shows that what you did there was that you said, hey, your idea was so important to me. That thing that you talked about, I went back and implemented some of your suggestions. Targeted validation, using the concept of forensic listening, understanding that our conversations, the conversations that we have with other people, are so important. And when we go back and we tell people, hey, I saw you, I heard you, and I did something as a result of that information, as a result of my encounter with you, you've taken yourself now from the top 10%, you're in the 1% now. And imagine if you did this across the board with your relationships, not only using targeted validation, but just understanding people at this deeper level. It can change your life and theirs as well. Hey, I hope that's been helpful. It's been great talking to you. If you have any questions, please reach out.
Hello everybody, this is Michael Bartlett here, and today I'm going to be doing a short presentation on consulting in a complex world. So let's have a look at the agenda. I'll be nice and quick. First of all, we're going to talk about, in the context of businesses, the difference between an ordered and a complex system. Then we're going to be looking at traditional consulting and the way that they approach consulting through these lenses. Then we're going to be looking at how we can become complexity conscious as consultants, the process that I'm going to outline. That includes the Estuarine framework, which was created by Dave Snowden. Safe to fail probes are the output of Estuarine mapping, so we'll talk a little bit about what those look like. And then finally, we'll look at something called proximate metrics, which is how we essentially monitor our safe to fail probes. So to get started, we need to make an important distinction between ordered and complex systems in relationship to the business world. So, ordered systems are made from several known parts that interact with one another. They're normally engineered by human beings. They're predictable, so in that sense we say they have reliable causality. This part does this part does this. You can think about lots of examples now off the top of your head about how different components interact in different things that are manufactured or engineered by people. We can design solutions that will have a good chance of working if we understand the systems well enough. So let's take the iPhone, for example. If they want to make an upgrade to the iPhone, they can be very confident that when they design for that, if they understand the system well enough, then they can go ahead and make those improvements and it's not going to result in catastrophe. Solutions tend to be flowchart or recipe based. So think about if you have a printer that's not working maybe in your home and you get on with the support team, typically there'll be a series of steps that you will walk through to try lots of different possibilities out. In that sense, because everything is bolted together and everything works in an orderly fashion, any solutions normally typically fall into simple flowcharts that one follows, or even simple recipes. And a great distinction between ordered and complex is ordered systems can be taken apart and then put back together again and continue to function. So a great example of this is a bicycle. Think about taking a bicycle apart into its different pieces and then you put them back together again and it carries on just as it was before. And so I've included that in my example. So examples of ordered systems: bicycles, motor vehicles, iPhone, and an espresso machine. Complex systems, however, are a little different. So they are made from several parts as well, but these parts are independent and entangled agents that interact with one another. And in a complex system, relationships and interactions are far more important than the actual components themselves. They're normally created by nature, or they involve humans interacting. And what I mean by that is, yes, they're normally created by nature, but sometimes a person or a number of people might create a complex system. So for example, let's say in your business you've got a group of people and you call them the culture committee. Well, the culture committee is created by people, but because it involves humans interacting, it's still classed as a complex system. And they can only be understood retrospectively. We cannot know what will happen next. So here's a really good example. Think about in your business, let's say you look at the meeting calendar and you see that there's a meeting tomorrow at 11 a.m. and a number of individuals are scheduled to be in that meeting. You cannot predict with certainty if those people will even show up. And even if they do show up, you cannot predict with certainty the exact conversation that's going to take place. It's unpredictable. There's just too many variables at play. And so with a complex system, when we want to make changes to them or interventions, we design for direction and emergence, and there's never a guarantee of success. Solutions should be monitored and adjusted as necessary. And unlike the previous type of system we talked about, these guys cannot be taken apart and then put back together again and expected to function. Think about doing that to a frog. That's not going to end very well. And the same applies to cities, to culture, to immune systems. Businesses, of course, it goes without saying, are also complex systems. So traditional consulting operates in the mindset that we are dealing with ordered systems. And that's why you end up with quotes like this. Let me tell you our secret sauce. Our clients already know what they want to do. We just give them permission to act, and they pay us handsomely for it. Yeah, that is a quote from a CEO of a successful company, and the quote was made to me directly over lunch, and I could not believe what I was hearing. But unfortunately, that is how a lot of consulting is starting to go these days. So traditional consulting treats businesses as ordered systems. That means they tend to focus on mission statements and visions rather than a sense of direction, because again, they think they can control the future, they can predict the future, and they take the recipe approach. So they'll typically come in with Model X or Model Y. A good example of this is the Boston box. You can Google that if you want to know what that is, but it's a very popular model used by the Boston Consulting Group. They'll say, well, this worked for client A, so it will work for client B. They'll tell them what they want to hear and then rinse and repeat, as you saw with the quote. The other thing they'll do, and you don't even need a consultant for this, businesses do this on their own as well, is They'll create what we call 1,000 stupid rules in order to give themselves the illusion of creating order. So 1,000 stupid rules is a phrase that I adopted from a company called The Ready. And they talk about basically creating organizational debt. And that's one way that businesses try to give themselves a sense of control and a sense that they can predict the future, is by just layering in as many policies and rules as they can. But of course, that actually can lead to disaster. So we really need, as both businesses and consultants, to become more complexity conscious. So how do we do that? Well, becoming complexity conscious involves treating businesses as they are, which is as complex systems. This means we focus on a sense of direction rather than trying to control all of the outcomes, and focusing on mission statements and vision. So we take an emergent approach. So we try to understand the patterns of each unique business. Then we create small initiatives that tell us about what works and what doesn't. We make the energy cost of sin higher than the energy cost of virtue. I borrowed that from Dave Snowden. And essentially what that means is, in any system, you're typically going to take the path of least resistance, because even though businesses aren't living, breathing organisms, they still behave in the same way. And of course they're composed of human beings as well, which of course we do that. And it's in our interest to always be lazy, to use the least amount of energy to get the optimal result. And so when you make these tweaks and these interventions in a complex system, one of the ways to be successful is, if you find something that you don't want to happen, then you just make the energy costs of doing that higher and higher until people no longer take that route. And then we also engage in vigilant simplification. This is one of the best ways to free the organization and to free it of organizational debt. We don't want to put people into analysis paralysis where there's so many friggin' rules, they don't know what's going on. People become scared to act because they don't want to make a mistake and then fall foul of one of these rules. You obviously don't want a free-for-all, because then that's no longer even considered a complex system. That's a disordered system. No one knows what's happening. There's no constraints. There's no boundaries. So there needs to be some, but kind of like, the American mentality, which as a Bret I do share. I take the same approach to systems as I do to government, which is it should be small and just needs to do its job. We don't need any of this overreaching, which causes more problems than good in the long run. So if you're still struggling with the idea of a business being a complex system, let me introduce an idea here that will help. So, and we can use this diagram here on the left. I want you to imagine a table with several magnets on it. So in this case, these magnets are the large purple cylindrical shapes that you can see that have been placed. Now, some of these you can control the polarity. So let's imagine you've got some buttons and you can control whether they're going to be very positive or very negative, and the strength. Some people control these magnets that you know, but there's also some people that you don't know about that control these magnets as well. So you can see how this could get a little messy. Now, the movement of these metal pieces, you see these nuts and bolts on the table. These can be predicted when there are 1 or 2 magnets. But once you reach 3 or more magnets, you cannot predict what is going to happen. You actually end up pushing what would have been an ordered system into a complex system. So this is a great example of understanding how one can become the other. And this is known in physics as the 3-body problem. So if you take the moon rotating around the Earth, rotating around the sun, you might think they follow very, very specific laws of physics and it's 100% entirely predictable. But unfortunately, because each has an effect on the other, once you reach 3, it becomes unpredictable. You can get within a certain level of accuracy, but no one can get 100% accurate on predicting that movement. And so the 3-body problem essentially is the foundation of the idea of complexity. So this essentially now you can think of as your business, this metaphor here. So the magnets are what we call modulators of the system. So they affect the movement of the materials on the table. You will have modulators in your business that affect the behaviors and the movements within your business. So there'll be many modulators within a business, and they will contribute to patterns of observable effects, or outcomes, if you will. So what we need to do is we need to seek to dampen the modulators that contribute to undesirable patterns, and amplify the ones that contribute to desirable patterns. And changes that we make should be small and safe to fail. We don't want to cause a catastrophe while we're in the process of trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. So that's why when we take Dave Snowden's approach to complexity theory, which is the one that we're going to see now with the SGI mapping in a moment, the general idea is these safe to fail, very, very small, low budget, little experiments that prove that we can nudge in the right direction. So in essence, when we try to think about consulting in a complex world, the best way to sum it up is we help business owners learn to dance with reality and create favorable conditions for positive emergence. So traditional consultants might say that, working on a business is like driving a car. You have certain levers, you have certain pedals, you do certain things, you put certain inputs into the system, you're going to get certain outputs. We don't see it that way. We see it's more like learning to ride an elephant. And so even if you are the most experienced person at riding an elephant, you still have to understand you don't really control it. There's a relationship there, and you're just trying to help make it do the things that you want it to do, but it's never actually going to work out 100% perfectly, but you can get better and better and better the more experienced you get, the more little things you try out here and there. And the image of the gardener, I've really put that there because if we think about culture, for example, culture isn't a problem that needs to be solved. This is a great misnomer in the world. Culture is something that needs to be cultivated. And so when you take your approach to a business as a complex system, all the so-called problems that you see really are emergent phenomena. And so what you need to learn to do is to cultivate the right conditions to create the right outcomes that you want to see. So here's an overview of the process that I'm going to be recommending that we use. So we're going to begin with the gather phase. So what we do is we gather narratives from the employee base, and those will illuminate both positive and negative patterns, and they may even possibly illuminate some of the modulators as well. Because normally when you talk to an employee about, what's working, what's not working in an organization, sometimes they will venture a causality statement like, well, I think this is kind of what's causing it. And so we need to gather as many of those narratives as we can. Then we sit down with the executive team and we map those. So we brainstorm from all of those narratives what the modulators might be, and we map those onto a graph, which is done using the SGI framework, which we'll talk about next. Then when we've done that, we identify the leverage points. So these are the modulators that are candidates for change, and they also priority for the business. Then we go ahead and we create our safe to fail probes, and we run them concurrently. Things aren't working, we remove them. Things are working, then of course we seek to increase them, make those smaller projects into bigger projects. And the final stage is we just monitor. We monitor using proximate metrics, which we'll talk about at the end of this presentation, and human sensor networks, which essentially means we put people in the business out there in the field looking at the business from different angles to try and see what's working and what's not working, and to report back on any phenomena that looks like it could be an emerging problem that the business isn't aware of yet. I found that businesses sometimes tend to disregard something if it happens once or twice in something that fits a preconceived notion they have of the business. But sometimes those things can be weak signals of a much bigger problem brewing. And that's why we want to try to make sure that we listen to everybody's perspective and we really mine for those weak signals. So we're going to talk about the SGI framework next. So let me talk about why this thing even exists. So the idea is that Dave Snowden came up with the SGI framework, and it follows the metaphor of an estuary, which has many, many different flows through. An estuary, for those who don't know, is the point at which a river meets the sea. And so you kind of have, fresh water mixing with salt water. You have a lot of movement and a lot of things changing. It's a very, very good metaphor for a business. And so it was developed as a counter to traditional approaches to strategy that are very fixed in nature. And it reflects the key principles of change in a complex environment. Some of the items might be stable, for example, like a granite cliff, while others, like sandbanks, could shift daily. And as the water flows in and out, some elements might be covered or visible. And you can see, of course, how this relates to the business. Some states in the business, you might have some behaviors that go below the surface. And then when those states change, then those behaviors pop up again. And so there are definitely a lot of moving parts, and it can become very, very overcomplicated if you take an ordered systems approach. But thankfully we have this framework, so we have a way of approaching this now. So here's what the estuarine framework looks like. It essentially uses a graph to map out the energy to change and the time to change. And so we map our modulators on there, and the idea is we try to figure out how much energy or time it would take to make a difference to one of those modulators, to change it, to make it, take more energy or take, more time or less in either case. So the items in the top right cannot really be changed. So those things are pretty fixed, like the granite cliffs that we mentioned earlier. The items in the liminal zone are changeable, but not really by the people doing the mapping. So that's where you might have to go to another, third party or a higher authority to try to see if those things could be changed. So they're less likely. And then we've got this item in the bottom left here. Now these items are very volatile. These are targets for actions aiming to stabilize or increase the energy of the time and energy around them. So essentially what it does is it contains them. And you might have volatile elements in your business that could be very dangerous and have high impact. So you immediately would want to look at those. But then everything else in the middle, those are the candidates for change. Those are going to be the candidates for your safe to fail probes. So safe to fail probes are about producing observable benefits through failure. So what we will do is for each modulator, we will ask, what can we change? And then from that set, we will ask, where can we monitor the impact of change? And also, where can we readily amplify success or dampen failure? We need to think small and local with questions like, well, what might happen if? We need to think about effort and motivation. We need to think about tweaking constraints, incentives, and rules. And the best way really that I've seen recommends using groups of trios. So you divide the room into groups of 3, and then you have one group look at certain probes, one group look at another group of probes, and then you rotate them, and then they can give feedback to each other's possible intervention ideas. And then finally, once we've got the probes, we want to think about the metrics. And here's why. Chicago Public Schools, there was an intervention designed to reduce the dropout rate. However, the problem is you can't wait a whole year to see if the intervention was successful. And because of the way that dropout rates tend to work, you can't even monitor it over time and compare it to last year or the year before, because you may suddenly get sudden spikes. So you really need a way of approximating whether or not you're going in the right direction. And this is where proximate metrics come from. So you look at what short-term measures could be examined, and what is our theory of change? What do we think is causing this overall needle to move? And then are there any smaller things that we can look at? And so in the case of Chicago Public Schools, they found that, well, it's not so much they found, they had the theory of change that, well, if we can boost attendance and if we can boost grades, we believe that correlates to the chances of someone graduating. So we're going to use those two short-term metrics. Now, we need to safeguard our metrics. So there's a number of thought experiments that you can do when you're in the process of creating these. As a group, run the misalignment test. So you imagine that the metrics do not predict success accurately. Okay, well then what would allow us to sniff out that misalignment as early as possible? And what alternative measures might provide potential replacements? The lazy bureaucrat test. If someone wanted to succeed in this metric with the least effort possible, what would they do? This helps you sniff out potential gaming of the metric. The unintended consequences test. Well, what if we succeed yet cause negative unintended consequences that outweigh the value of our work? What should we be paying attention to that might contribute to this? And then the dark modulators test. Imagine we succeed, but what else might explain the success other than our own efforts? I.e., could everything we have done actually have done nothing? Something else was causing the success. Could those things exist? Brainstorm them and then ask, are we tracking those factors? So in summary, by recognizing businesses as complex systems, Consultants can help leadership teams to understand the patterns and behaviors that flow through their organizations. This ultimately leads to clearer decisions, better outcomes, and happier and healthier organizations, moving, of course, in the right direction. So thanks for your time today. Please contact me if you have any questions.
Hi there, I'm Tom Kerwin. I'm a UX, CX and change professional with 25 years of experience, a lot of it in research and design, but then moving into leading product and project initiatives to change things in organisations for the better. I'm the author of a card deck called Innovation Tactics, and at the moment I'm consulting and coaching individuals and teams to help them improve their ability to discover and deliver change at the same time. Today I'm here to introduce an idea called the Estuarine Framework. This is a new framework from Dave Snowden, and it's a radically different way of thinking about how we make change happen. More on that later. But first, let's have a look at what we're going to look at today. So we're going to start with CX and change management as it's mostly done. I'll say now, the approach we're going to be looking at today, the Estuarine Framework, is used in all forms of strategy, from top-level board strategy with multinational corporations down to individuals looking to change things within their environment right now. But today we're going to focus on the world of CX. And we're going to start with looking at CX as how it's mostly done and the way that I've experienced it in the past, the way that I see it being done. We're going to look at the limits and the hazards of that standard approach. That's the next place we're going. Then let's look at an alternative, this new alternative that's complex and simpler. We'll have a quick overview of how it's done. I'll warn you now, I can't go into the full excruciating detail. It is a very deep method, but I want to share enough that you can get an idea of what's going on, and then I'm going to share some information and some links so you can find out more. So let's dive in with CX as it's currently done. And I'm sure anyone who's been involved in the world of CX is familiar with journey maps. It's a classic system. It's a way that we can map what's going on right now. I've made a few of these. The ones at the bottom are ones directly that I have made at various different companies with some of the details blurred to protect the guilty. Now, it's a nice way to work. It shows us where there are low points and high points within an experience, and it gives us a way of seeing what do we want to change. And the next thing we tend to do, obviously, is set a vision and try to close the gap. So here we've taken one of those templates. I've identified these touch points that are particularly bad and we think we can do something about. And then we've set a vision to make them great. And now we're going to start working on those, make some project plans, and off we go. So far, so obvious, right? No problems. Except it doesn't quite work like that. So where are the limits and the hazards in this standard approach? The first one I'm going to touch on is this idea of bramble bushes in a thicket. That is a metaphor from Alicia Guerrero, which explains the feeling of complexity. When things are complex, everything's intertwined. You can't dismantle the bramble bushes without destroying the bushes. And you can't just pull on one of the twigs and not affect everything else. When you pull somewhere, all sorts of stuff is going to move and you don't know what. That to me describes an awful lot of CX type experiences and our attempts to change them. We pull on one thing and stuff over in a completely apparently unrelated place all falls apart. This is classic complexity. Now, how do we come across this when we're doing CX type projects? Well, often when we make our journey map, we find that some stuff is pretty good and some stuff is pretty bad, as it is right now. What we then find is the stuff that's pretty good is the stuff that was generally fairly easy and obvious to work on. The stuff where the people in situ could see, I could make that better. I don't like how this is. Let's make it better. And they make it better and it gets better. The stuff that's still bad when an experience is quite mature, when a service or a product has been around for a while, the stuff that's still bad tends to be intractable problems, tends to be things that are multifactorial, that are intertangled with other concepts, other ideas that are going on, or that are too big and multi-player in order that one team can actually make a meaningful difference. They're really hard to move because they're complex. Now, this is touching on an idea which is the Kerwin framework. This is a framework for understanding what in the world is ordered, or what within our world that we're dealing with is ordered, and we can make a plan and move forward. What is complex, where we're going to need to probe, sense and respond. We can't know the right answer up front. And what is chaotic, where something has become a crisis and we need to act quickly in order to stabilise things. I'm not going to go into depth in Kerwin. Frank's talk does that, and there's lots of information out there already. But if you're not aware of this, please just bear with me for the next part of the talk. I'm actually doing this on special request from Michael. I'm going to overlay on this something that makes a lot of sense of Kerwin for me, and that is Kerwin dynamics. So here we've got those same domains, the ordered on the right, the complex in the top left, and the chaotic in the bottom left. And we're seeing how with Kerwin, the Kerwin framework, it's not about whether you're in one of those domains. It's how you move different aspects of your environment and your projects through those domains. And it's shifting across the boundaries takes work and energy and time sometimes. And that's what we're going to look at next. We've got a couple of particularly interesting cycles captured on this diagram. One is what the CX professionals want to do, which is find opportunities by moving to a place of curiosity and confusion. This is called aporia in Kerwin, but a place of deliberate confusion where we're looking at our journey map and thinking, what's going on? Let's go and explore the world and find out. We're then going to go and explore that, what's keeping it that way, what's making it that way, and we're going to go through complexity and then find ways that we can stabilize things back into the ordered domain. And we're going to take elements that we can constrain correctly, that we can make scalable through this liminal zone into the ordered zone. Why is that good? Well, in the ordered zone, it's much easier to scale things. We can get repeatable results. We can make things more predictable. All of that is pretty good. And what companies love to have predictable things going on. But in order to make those happen, we don't just will them into being. We're going to have to tangle with complexity. Now, there's another cycle which we can get into, which is the chaos grazing cycle. This is the world where a brilliant individual can navigate the complexity and fix these borderline crisis incidents, but they're never finding repeatable systems that can be brought across the liminal zone and become ordered. This is your heroic firefighter, your heroic service person who can fix problems for one person at a time, but hasn't found a way to systematize them by following this blue line. So there's a couple of a very quick overview of the highlights of the Kerwin dynamics model. I like to think about overlaying the dominant ways of working at the moment over this model. And one way I see this happening is, I'm sure you've heard of the term outcome oriented, and I'm actually going to jump and lay straight on our techniques. So in many businesses right now, we've had agile, particularly the Scrum flavor of agile. We're talking about OKRs or goal setting, stretch goals, that sort of idea. And we're talking about A/B testing and experimentation. Now, all of those methods are really effective for the liminal complex zone. This is that borderline zone between complex and ordered. And this is where outcome-oriented methods work really well. The reason we can use outcome-oriented is that we've constrained things enough by the time we've got to this border that we can actually identify some outcomes that are within our reach, some adjacent possible places that we want to get to. We might not know exactly how to get them. And that's where Scrum and OKRs and A/B testing come into play. We can do limited experimentation around it with some fairly clear metrics, and we can often make great progress. The times when I've made great progress on CX journey maps is when we've found these sort of almost ordered elements to just pull across the line, where we've done a load of research, we've understood the problem in enough depth that we could do some experimentation and find ways to make progress. So that's really familiar to people. Often the ordered domain stuff, the complicated stuff, that's fairly familiar as well. This is the world of project management, requirements and tolerances. This is your big factories. This is you building a house. I don't want you to agile my house. I want to have a plan and stick to the plan. Thank you very much. However, a bunch of the dynamic that we're dealing with here is neither liminal complex nor ordered. A bunch of it is right in complexity. It's deep in complexity. And here, there are too many possible outcomes and too many variables for us to be able to make any kind of plan, and for us even to be able to select a subset of outcomes to focus on. Here, instead of managing for outcomes, we want to manage for emergence. We're going to manage what we can manage, which is the situation, the conditions, the constraints, and the constructors within our environment, in order to see what happens. Do good things happen that we want to have more of, or do we cause problems and we want to stop doing whatever we're doing? We're going to need to probe the world, sense and respond. And as we probe and sense and respond and learn more and start to constrain the sorts of outcomes that we're looking at, the sort of outcomes we now learn we're able to address and tackle, that's when we can start to move things across and identify some outcome-oriented projects that we could take on. Just a quick note, there's two other elements here. The best practice is right there. Best practice is only really possible in the very, very clear domain. In the rest of it, I would avoid best practice as much as possible. And then there's chaos. When you get thrown into crisis, often because people were following best practice when it wasn't really appropriate. And when we tipped into crisis, we're going to need to act decisively in order to stabilise the situation and create more options for ourselves later, which moves us into complexity and starts the journey around the chaos grazing, or ideally that blue line to get back to where we want to be. So that's a quick overview of how you're going to use different methods when you're in a different domain, when you're operating in a different domain of reality. And one of the big mistakes is trying to use the methods of one domain on another domain. That creates all sorts of problems, which brings us back to our hazards. So when we're dealing with these complex, intractable, multifactorial problems, what we often find is they are that way because we don't know a clear way forward. The road is closed because we can't get the work on the roadmap because no one can guarantee results. People disagree about what the right way forward is. People have often tried initiatives that haven't really changed things in the past, and this has created some resistance in the organisation to putting more effort in, to throwing good money after bad. It's also a place where, because we're uncertain, we often get analysis paralysis, and we end up getting into bigger and bigger projects to try and fix things more and more. And this is a big risky thing. The other big risk that this creates is we start to think, well, let's incentivize the outcomes that we want, or the emergent properties that we'd like the system to have. Let's incentivize the call center staff to do a better job by making sure that they score well on NPS. And if people don't score well on NPS, say, then they're going to get reprimanded or fired or whatever that might be. Let's make sure that we're not leaving people waiting for too long in our call centres. That sort of thing. We want to keep the call waiting times down so that we make sure people aren't on hold for too long. These sorts of things are the properties that are consequences of a whole loads of conditions that are going on. And when we try to manage the consequences, manage those emergent properties by setting targets, we end up with what are called cobra effects. This comes from a classic old story, from the days of the British colonial times in India, where the British folks who were over there didn't like all the cobras wandering around. So they thought, brilliant, let's set a bounty, and every local who brings the cobra's head will pay them a rupee. And this was wonderful for a little while, until they realised that what they'd done is incentivise the creation of cobra farms. And lots of locals were now farming cobras in their houses so that they could chop off the heads and make money by bringing the heads. The British, at that point, immediately decided to end the reward scheme, at which point all the local farmers realised, well, there's no more value, so they released all the cobras from the farms back into the environment. By trying to incentivise people to remove the cobras, the British created more cobras. This is one of the classic effects you get, which is bundled under something that you might know as Goodhart's Law. This is Margaret Stratton's reframing of Goodhart's Law. Any measure that becomes a target ceases to be an effective measure. Now, this isn't true in a sufficiently ordered system. If you're in a factory, you want to work to tolerances, and you have targets for tolerances, and that's okay. But in a complex system, and all of CX and strategy is complex, this is what you're going to get problems. And in the extreme, you get this old joke. This is the feeling that you get in a lot of CX programs where people are being instructed to do things that are beyond their power to do. So what can we do instead? Let's look at an alternative that's complex and much simpler. That sounds like a bit of a contradiction, but actually complexity is just that sense of bramble bushes in a thicket. How you operate in complexity is something that's often quite natural to people. We do it when we navigate on a journey and there's a problem with the transport along the way. A train is cancelled, we miss a connection. We figure out how to work around that problem and resolve it using a whole load of different methods and understanding the world and being adaptive and flexible. That's us operating in complexity. Humans are naturally quite good at it. The problem comes when we step through the door of the office and suddenly everything needs to be deductive and linear and so-called rational, and we forget how to just get on with life. So it's much, much simpler sometimes to accept complexity and work with it. But there is a challenge of, right, but how do you do that in a work environment? That's where the Estuarine framework comes in really exciting, I think. It is a method for working with the evolutionary potential of the present instead of trying to set a vision in the future and yank our way there. As we've seen, there's some problems when we try to do that. When there's intractable problems in our situation, setting a vision can often be counterproductive or doesn't help us to get anywhere. What we can do instead is manage the conditions in the environment and see what emerges from that, and then double down on the stuff that we like and damp the stuff that we don't. Now, the way that the environment in a strategic sense, in a business sense, works is often much closer to an estuary than it is to a fixed landscape or a road map or something like that, where there's definite directions we can go and we can kind of go anytime we like and it's all fine. In the estuary, there are certain features which are fixed. These big hills are not going anywhere any soon. We've got the granite cliffs and things like that. But there's also shifting sandbanks underneath the water level that we're going to need to keep mapping and make sure that we don't run aground on. The water isn't always in the same place. This is tidal. An estuary is where the sea meets a river, and it has tidal waters and a mixture of sea and salt water and fresh water. So the tide might be coming in or going out, or it might be just changing. And there's different things we can do at different times. If you've got a low-powered boat, you might only be able to make a crossing at the changing of the tide, not when the tide is moving quickly. So all of those factors come into play. There's also the rest of the ecosystem operating there. The foliage, the plant life that is holding the bank together. If we inadvertently kill that off, we might then erode the bank and change the way the river flows. in a way that we can never put back. So there's all of this going on, and this is a much more appropriate metaphor for the ebb and flow of the reality of strategy and for customer experience. Now, the estuary framework starts with that metaphor of the estuary and guides a team. This could be a top-level strategy team in a multinational corporation, or it could be a project team in a tiny company, or an individual managing their own situation. But it guides them through a series of steps, a simple process, which enables them to make their own map of their estuary and then start to take action on what's going on in the landscape in order to make different outcomes more or less likely and to explore what's possible within the landscape so that they can get those results, shift that customer experience in the end. Not directly by creating a vision, but by changing the conditions and making the emergence of better customer experience more likely. So let's have a little overview of how it's done. This is going to be high level, and I'm going to show you some quick pictures. I want to let you know before we begin, there is a bunch more to this, and Dave himself, who was introduced in the previous picture, has said this is a method that you need to be mentored in if you want to try it. So again, this is an introduction in order to give you an overview of what's going on so that you can look into it more if you think it's interesting. I can say for myself, I think this is one of the most exciting things I've seen in years. Having tried over and over again that backcasting based approach of see what's bad at the moment, set a vision for when it's going to be wonderful, and then try to plan our way there, I've seen that be ineffective, to be honest, over and over again, and cause so much pain. This estuary framework is the one of the first things I've seen in a long time that shifts that and enables us to take genuine action. It's actionable, it's practical, it's fast for leaders to understand. All of these things make it really, really tractable and useful, where a lot of methods that I've tried before that try to embrace complexity tend to just get people going, well, we don't know what to do. We don't know what to do next. This is a quick way to get from we want to make things better, but we don't know how, to now we know what to do next. With that intro out of the way, let's look at the first step. The first step is we're going to brainstorm what's in your estuary. So group of people here, in the image here, what I've done is broken down a bigger group into smaller groups. So each group can then brainstorm around the constraints and constructors that are at work within their environment. And constraints are fairly well understood. There's things that are limiting or containing or connecting different aspects of the situation. Constructors are repeatable processes that enable us to make a transformation. And these can happen either by passage, like a machine, or a ritual, or they can happen by contagion, like an idea spreading through an environment. Or a catalyst changing in a reaction. It's a predictable result, and it happens over and over again. So we use those as a kind of a typology or a set of prompts in order to get people thinking and exploring what are all the constraints and constructors at play within our environment. Now, different groups here might have thought of different examples. That's great. We want to maximize the number of perspectives at this stage, and we want to have so many constraints and constructors that it's actually impossible to hold them all in your head and imagine that you could even have a holistic picture of what's going on. You can't. So let's just get it all out there and deal with reality as it is. You'll notice that I've crossed out some words at the bottom as well. In order to start this, we don't need to make explicit goals. We don't need to have explicit plans. We don't need to do any debating. We don't need to set a vision. Now, all of those things might have been happening. They might be present within the individuals in the situation we're in the workshop, but they don't need to be made explicit. We don't need to fight about them. All we're going to do next, once we've done our brainstorming, is collectively map the relative energy cost and time to change those constraints and constructors that we've brainstormed. So what we're doing here is, for example here, this green one here is, we believe that constraint, say, would take a longer time to change than this red one here, which will take a longer time to change than this green one here. All three are going to take less energy to change, where energy is a stand-in for money, attention, effort, all those sorts of ideas. Are we going to pay? Are we going to put attention on it? They're all going to take less effort than these constraints up here. That's all we're saying. And we're looking at, this is our landscape, and these are the things which may or may not change. So if we think back to that estuary, these are kind of the equivalent of those big hills. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be pretty stable, and we can't really change them without a huge amount of effort. Whereas down here, we've got those shifting sandbanks and potentially the tide. It's going to keep changing, and it might change on a whim. The sandbanks might move around without us knowing. So they're very low energy and time to change. And then in the middle, we might have stuff like the foliage and things like the way the river flows in certain ways. We could rechannel it. It's going to take us some energy and time, and it may have knock-on consequences, but we can make those changes more easily. So what we're doing here, you see, is kind of mapping our estuary. Now, one of the most exciting things, as I mentioned, the first thing here, we don't need to have debates. We don't need to fight for consensus and try to win and make people agree that where we think something goes is where it should be. Instead, if there's any conflict, if people are disagreeing and saying, well, I don't think that goes there, I think it should be over there, well, I think it should be over there. When we have that conflict, all we do as a facilitator is guide the people to break it down into smaller pieces. And when you break them down into smaller pieces, we just keep doing that and moving the smaller pieces into new places until the disagreement is gone away. And so we end up then with a map that we have all agreed on. Well enough to move forwards, at least. The next step is to add some boundaries. Now, these are there are three boundaries, and we'll go through these at a high level. Counterfactual is like those granite cliffs. Realistically, this is not going to change. The energy cost and the time cost of changing these constraints and constructors is so great that they're very unlikely to change. The next boundary we might put in is the liminal boundary. This shows the limit of our, as a group, our agency over the world. This is where there are constraints and constructors that someone might be able to change, but it's outside of our ability to do so at the moment. And then finally, the vulnerable boundary down the bottom. This is where the stuff to the bottom left of this line is so fast to change. It can happen so suddenly with so little control over it that it actually becomes risky. This is where something can turn on a dime and upend us without us realising that it's even happening. So once we've mapped these our estuary and added in these boundaries, we can start to decide what we want to do about it. And this is where we step into action. And where things get very exciting. So we now create actions in the form of micro projects. So for the boundaries, particularly the counterfactual boundary, we want to monitor. That granite cliff isn't going anywhere anytime soon, but if it does start to move, we really want to know, because that could be devastating. Meanwhile, in the liminal zone, we might think about requesting permission. There are things here which we can't currently change, but maybe we could go and ask the people who can change them. We might be able to lobby or just simply ask to remove a rule or a piece of governance. Meanwhile, we looking at the stuff inside the vulnerability zone, we might want to try to stabilize that, to try to contain it, make it more stable, stop it from moving around. Maybe, as you see on beaches, we might put those, I forgot what they're even called, but the wooden posts in to try to stop the sand from all washing away. We might try to do that sort of thing for some of these vulnerability boundaries, boundary constraints and constructors. Then we get to the meat of where we're going to work. We're going to take, as again, break into groups, and one at a time, each group will take one of the constraints or constructors that we've mapped into this zone, which is where we have agency to act on various different affordances. And we're going to decide, do we want to change something about where this sits? Do we want to reduce the time cost or reduce the energy cost for change? And we'll think, if we want to do that, how might we do that? What's a micro project that could change the energy cost? Or we might say, actually, we like it where it is, so we want to stabilise it. Or we might say, actually, we like it where it is, now's the time to act. We're going to set a micro project that triggers change in the estuary as a whole. And finally, there might be something we set for conditional change, where we're going to monitor and see if something over here changes, then that means we need to change something over here, for instance. So there's all these sorts of actions. It goes quite deep, but what you end up with is actually a fairly simple set of micro projects, which you can then collect into portfolios. We can use Kerwin to do this, or there are other methods. And what you're going to do is emerge with a bunch of work that you can throw into your normal project management approaches and get things done. The result of any of those micro projects that you do is going to be either happy outcomes, something good is going to happen and you're going to be delighted, or you're going to change the conditions in a way that makes happy outcomes easier or more likely the next time round in the future. Or you'll get increased awareness of your situation. So the next time you come to do your estuarine framework mapping, you can end up with a better picture of reality and more effective micro projects next time. So that's a quick overview of how the process goes. I'll just show you, this is a quick example of a real exercise here that I did with one of my clients. So we very quickly were able to map their constraints and constructors and then develop this portfolio of micro projects, which they've gone on and taken action on. And that has shifted the situation that they're in and enabled them to take some more decisive action. So with that, hopefully that's enough for you to get a quick overview of estuarine framework. Now, one final question is, how long does it take? The recommendation at the moment is that it's probably 2 half days of workshops. And if you think about, and 2 half days of workshops, and it works really well as like a pre-planning process for strategy. It's a way of preparing the ground to make your conventionally planned strategy less risky. So it reduces the risk for any strategy that you're going to do. And it only takes 2 half days, plus a bit of micro project work. But imagine if your leadership team could walk into a room and then emerge after 2 half days of workshops with a crisp portfolio of actionable and effective micro projects for teams to start working on. That, to me, that's a big shift from what I've seen in many places, where instead it's weeks, months even, of debates over which goals we should be chasing and who should be on what and all this sort of stuff. This has the potential to be incredibly efficient. The other wonderful thing about this, those attending this workshop, they don't need to align on a vision. They don't need to fight it out until one person's agenda triumphs over the others. All they need is a vague agreement that things as they are aren't as good as we'd like, and we'd kind of like to do something about it. And they're going to go into that room, and after 2 half days of mapping and thinking and having discussions and ideally not even getting into debates, they're going to emerge with those micro projects and take action. Now, I'm going to leave you with where to find out more. So a quick little overview here. There is a detailed wiki of methods, including which will be updated to explain the latest thinking around estuarine framework. That's at kerwin.io. That's open to everyone. It's an open source wiki. And if you do use the methods and want to share, you can add your experiences into there and help to build the knowledge with the rest of the community. Speaking of the community, there's also a vibrant Slack community all about Kerwin and naturalizing sense-making methods. If you want to learn more, that's where people hang out, ask questions, chat and debate some of the finer details of this stuff. We've been following along with the development of estuarine framework for the last year, and it's been fascinating to see the whole idea develop over that time. There's also, if you want to get some more detail on how an estuarine framework workshop might actually play out, I wrote up a case study. I was mentored by Dave through one of the first applications of it in full in the real world. And there's a link there which I've shortened, and that will take you to my Substack. There's also another article which goes into more about what I've been beefing about here, about the problem with setting a vision and working backwards from it, and that's via JP Castlin's newsletter, and it's there in the next link. There's also, I mentioned, my card deck, Innovation Tactics. I've got a link here which can get you 10% off. Now, I'll say up front, SGRM Framework is not in there, but it is packed with lots of other methods which are complexity coherent and are all about enabling you to take action in small ways today and make products, services, and experiences better. And then finally, if you want to see more about me, my website is tomkerwin.com. And there are links to most of the things here on there. And put it this way, I'd love to hear from you. I love nerding out about this stuff. If you'd like to hit me up and chat more about SGRM Framework or any of the other methods, please do drop me a note. With that, I'd like to say thank you very much to Michael for inviting me to make this talk, and to everyone else who's given their time today to make these talks for CX Day. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you all the best.